So now they want Oprah to come down there and campaign for the Dems, and they want, as I mentioned, Lin-Manuel Miranda. So they're trying to get out the black vote, and they're trying to get the Hispanic vote. Do we believe, obviously these two groups historically have tended to vote more Democrat, Hispanics less and less so. That's been an ongoing story over the past couple of years. And even the black vote in the New York Times Siena poll that we saw recently was growing for Republicans. I think it was up at 19%, 18 or 19%, whereas, about 10 years ago, it was down at 8 for Republicans. So it's certainly growing in strength for the GOP, but, not a majority. So what's happening with the black vote and the Latino vote in Georgia?
Yeah, well, right now, Republicans are trying to expand the battleground map. Governor Kemp, as you mentioned, is ahead in the polls between 5, 6, 7, even some polls show him at 10 points above Stacey Abrams. And so he feels like he can go make a play for the suburbs. He feels like he can go reach out to African-American voters in a way that he frankly, and he'll admit it, he did not in 2018. He hardly campaigned in Atlanta's suburbs, which are very diverse. Just like many suburbs, they're not monolithically white at all anymore, like they might have been 40 years ago. They're very diverse. And so he's reaching out. The Republican National Committee and other GOP groups are opening offices in the suburbs and in the cities that are geared specifically towards voters of color, Hispanic voters, Asian American voters, black voters. And so they're trying to put Democrats on the defensive. And Stacey Abrams has kind of pivoted in a sense, or at least acknowledged that. And she's held a number of events in recent weeks geared specifically not just to African American voters, but in particular to black men, because she knows that the polls show her numbers with African Americans soft right now. Some polls show her at 80% of support among black voters. That sounds like a lot, but she needs to be closer to 90, 95. And she lags behind Senator Warnock, the state's first black U.S. senator, who's more like closer to 90% when it comes to black voters. So no one thinks that Governor Kemp will get 20% of the African American vote. But what Democrats worry about is a sort of a suppressed or a lower than expected turnout among black voters. And so far, it's very early, but early voting so far, there's been a surge of not just overall voting, but black voters so far in the first 2 days.
Fascinating. Yeah, because you've got like never-ending voting in Georgia like we have in Pennsylvania and other states now. It just goes on and on.
3 weeks.
I think it was you guys, right? Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Georgia News collaborative poll on Hispanic voters, shifting gears, showing Stacey Abrams has 49% of their support. Kemp has 48%. That's well within the poll's margin of error of 5.6 percentage points, which is surprising, right? That it's that tight. That, yes, she's got a 1-point advantage, maybe, if you factor out the margin of error, but it's surprising that it's that tight. And secondly, Walker versus Warnock, the Republican versus the Dem. Walker's got a 6-point advantage with Hispanic voters, 47 over 41. Is that also surprising?
Yeah, not to say the least. And a lot of Democrats are surprised. And now it's a small sample size. It's about 300 folks who were polled. The poll was in English, so that could have an effect. But yes, and it's about 5% margin of error, so a little higher than we usually see with polls. But to say the Democrats were surprised is probably an understatement. The Latino voting bloc, the Hispanic voting bloc in Georgia is small, but it's growing. And in a state as closely divided as Georgia is, we're just fewer than 12,000 votes divided Joe Biden and Donald Trump back in 2020, that even small fluctuations, even small changes in voting behavior can make big differences in the November outcome. That's why both parties are really increasingly focusing on Hispanic voters and driving up turnout. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a tremendous number of Hispanic voters in the Atlanta suburbs, particularly in Gwinnett County, which was a Republican stronghold until 2016, flipped blue during the Trump era, and is now basically a cornerstone of the Democratic coalition. So for Republicans, they're not going to win Gwinnett County, but if Republicans can kind of keep Democratic margins down in Gwinnett County and other suburban areas, then they can grow their leads. And that's the angle right now.
So I have a question for you, because I have a theory that they don't usually poll for this, but I have a theory about what's happening with these voters. And as Republican support grows amongst black voters and Hispanic voters, it occurs to me that both of these groups traditionally are churchgoers, high Christian population. And I do think that there's a backlash to the crazy trans ideology that's, coming into all the schools, and the over-sexualization of school educations, and all the wokeism when it comes to race essentialism and so on, which I think, even groups that are supposed to be benefiting from some of those race essentialism policies, have had it with everything reducing to skin color. I mean, we've heard a lot of Latinos who are now running for office saying this is one of their inspirations. So I just wonder to what extent you think that's factoring. And I know I get economy. But as somebody who covers Georgia politics and follows the news cycle down there, has this been a factor?
Yeah, I would say it's fair to say in general, transgender politics is a factor because it's hard to turn on the radio right now and not hear ads aimed at African-American voters from the conservative standpoint attacking transgender policies, right? But, you mentioned it, you hit the nail on the head. It still goes back to the economy. I mean, that same poll that you just mentioned showed that very few, it was only about 6%. So even with the giant margin of error, 6%, it shows if only 6% of Latino voters are confident in the direction of the country, there's a problem there. And
my goodness.
And a majority disapprove of Joe Biden's performance in office. So I think the real biggest factor boils down to the economy and a distrust of, or at least a apprehension towards Joe Biden right now.
6% of Hispanic voters say they think the country's headed in the right direction in Georgia. I mean, that's stunning, and that is probably the worst fact for the Democrats running there right now. And that's the reason why Joe Biden's not going to Georgia. That has nothing to do with schedules or anything else. That's the reason why. All right, so let's talk about the debate the other night, because there was this viral clip all over the internet yesterday of another race out in Arizona, and that's Kari Lake, who's the Republican running for governor there. She's going to win. She's ahead right now, and her opponent won't debate her and isn't a particularly compelling character. I really think Kari Lake is going to win. And it's saying something because she kind of came out of nowhere. She was a news anchor. It was the Republican she was challenging for the nomination was much better known and much better funded. And Kari Lake comes up and she gets it, and now she's running in the general and looks to win. The viral clip was of Kari Lake pushing back on reporters in the way only a reporter would know how to do, right? Like she was like, oh, because she's one of those Trump didn't lose people. And she's like, oh, you want to talk election denial? Let's do that. And she goes through the long list of Hillary Clinton denying the elections, Stacey Abrams denying elections, the LA Times saying that it was stolen from Hillary, and so on. It was good stuff, great stuff, right? She went on offense. Well, one of the people on that list was Stacey Abrams, and you kind of raised something similar in that debate that the governor candidates had the other night, on Monday night, where you asked her about her election denialism in a great exchange. Here's part of it.
This election, do you commit to accept the outcome of the vote, regardless of what it shows? And do you stand by your use of words like rigged 4 years ago to describe the state's election system?
In 2018, I began my speech on November 16th acknowledging that Governor Kemp had won the election. I then proceeded to lay out in grave detail the challenges faced by voters under his leadership. Just today, a homeless woman was denied the right to vote in Forsyth County because she did not receive a provisional ballot because she had been challenged. As governor, I intend to stand up for the right to vote. I will always acknowledge the outcome of elections, but I will never deny access to every voter, because that is the responsibility of every American to defend the right to vote.
In 2018, in the governor's race, we had the largest African-American turnout in the country. She said that Senate Bill 202, our recent Elections Integrity Act, what we passed 2 years ago, would be suppressive in Jim Crow 2.0. Just this past May in our primaries, we again had record turnout in the Republican primary and the Democratic primary. In Georgia, it's easy to vote and hard to cheat.
Good for you for asking this question. But the bottom line is she was an election denier. She may claim otherwise now, but we've played the sound bites before. I have one very affirmative statement to make, she said after the election. We won. This was a stolen election. They stole it from the voters of Georgia. She filed a whole lawsuit claiming that the whole system was unfair. It got thrown out in harsh terms by an Obama appointed judge just recently. It was an embarrassing decision for her. There's been absolutely no evidence to support her claims that election was stolen from her in any way. He beat her by 54,000 votes. And yet to me, she still was kind of hanging on a little, like I'm still the champion of the downtrodden and the forgotten and the people who can't get to the polls. What did you make of the whole thing?
Sometimes in these debates too, you have to ask questions that you've heard the answer to before, but
Sure.
a broader audience. And so she's talked about this with me before. She's talked about this with other reporters, and even on the campaign trail. She gave us a slightly different answer than she usually does, because she usually says, "Look, did I refuse to concede? That I used that language? Yes, But did I try to undermine? Did I try to overturn the election results? Like Donald Trump did? No. And so she makes that distinction between her and Donald Trump. But in this case, we weren't talking about Donald Trump. We were talking about this election. And there were Republicans who noted that she said she would acknowledge the results, but that she didn't say that she would accept them, right? And so there's a little bit of a nuance there. Afterwards, her campaign said that it would indeed accept the results no matter what they show. But that 10 days of, we call it kind of purgatory. There was 10 days between the election and her non-concession speech. And there was a moment, there was 10 days of very great uncertainty in Georgia because we had never, at least in modern, recent Georgia history, been through anything like that since the 3 governors scandal 60 years ago that we don't need to get into here. But it was a very big, big question mark over our election system. And in the days following, at the time, Democrats were putting an asterisk by Governor Kemp's name, right? He won by default or he won by whatever. And there was a concern even among Democrats, hardcore Democrats, that by doing that, undermining his legitimacy, that you call into question the entire election system. And then when there is a disaster, when there is a moment where the state needs to unify and around a state leader and you're putting an asterisk by his name, then that's a problem. And the Democrats stopped doing that. But clearly that rhetoric from 2018 still continues to become an issue in this race.
Are you tired of feeling like someone's always watching you on the internet? Maybe advertisers know a little bit too much about you, or you're concerned about the privacy of your identity. Using incognito mode will not solve the problem either. IPVanish VPN is here to protect your right to privacy and to help you stay anonymous online. IPVanish helps you safely browse the internet without exposing your private details to third parties like hackers, your ISP, or advertisers. When you use IPVanish, all of your data is encrypted. That means your private details, your passwords, your communications, your browsing history, and much, much more will be completely shielded from falling into the wrong, weird, prying hands. Even your physical location will be hidden. IPVanish is offering an incredible 70% off their yearly plan for our listeners with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So try it. If you don't like it, you got a 30-day money-back guarantee. This is like getting 9 months for free, 70% off. IPVanish is super easy to use as well. You tap one button, you're instantly protected. Take your privacy back today with a brand rated 4.6 out of 5 on Trustpilot. Go to ipvanish.com/Megyn and use that promo code MEGYN to claim your 70% savings. ipvanish.com/Megyn. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.